Okay, welcome to the first day of the Wallaby Cinder PTG. We've got the Etherpad being shared for people here at the first time. The way we usually do this is Lucio is sharing the Etherpad on a spare machine just so it's part of the recording. But what I suggest you do is just open your own copy of the Etherpad outside of BlueJeans, and then you should have control over whether you see the screen share or not. So I just tend to turn the screen share off and just see the people only, but that's up to you. And then you can see, who's here. And then you've got the Etherpad for yourself to work in. I just see a bunch of familiar faces. Okay, I guess since it's on the agenda, let's go around and just introduce ourselves. So we'll be here all week. We encourage participation, so we will all introduce ourselves so you know who we are. We're having happy hour today at 1500 UTC, so in 2 hours, so you can get to know everybody a little informally, and hopefully that will help lubricate the conversations for the rest of the week, even though we won't have any actual, lubricating style beverages. Okay, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Brian Rossmeda. I'm the Cinder PTL. And what that means is I sort of run these meetings. And I work for Red Hat, and I've been working on Cinder for like 2 years now. So that's me. So welcome everybody. And then I guess I'm going to go. I don't know if the list of names is the same for everybody or not, the ordering. But the next person on the list for me is Eric Harney. So if you could introduce yourself, Eric, real quick.
Sure. Eric Harney. Work at Red Hat with Brian. I've been working on Cinder for a number of years, and glad to be here this week. Gorka, I think you were next.
Hi, I'm Gorka. I work with Red Hat with Eric, Ryan, Sophia, Saf, Rayad, etc. Yep. I'm located in Madrid, and yeah, I've been working on Cinder for 5.5 years or something like that. That's it mostly. Yep. I don't know who's next. Apparently, Etherpad is next.
It's still Etherpad.
I can go next. So I'm Jay Bryant. Been Cinder Core for about 6 years now. Been in OpenStack for 7. Used to work with IBM representing them and their driver maintainers, and now I'm a principal cloud architect with Lenovo and member of the OpenStack TC. So that's me. How about Sophia?
Hey, I'm Sophia. As Gorka said, I'm working in Red Hat, and I think I've been working with Cinder about 2 years ago. And yeah, I don't know. Lucio, you want to go?
Sure. My name is Lucio. I work as a software engineer for NetApp. I work with Cinder since a few years ago, and since last release, Victoria, I'm part of the core team. And I'm not sure if you can hear my cat, but yeah. That's me. Nice to meet you again. Luigi, you wanna be the next?
Just landed. Sorry, what are you doing? Like roundtable presentation?
We're just
introduction.
Sorry. I'm Luigi Toscano, Toschi on IRC. I'm quality engineer in Red Hat, and yeah, I try to fix broken testing stuff.
Rajat, you're showing up next.
Hi, I'm Rajat. I work at Red Hat with other folks, and I've been in Cinder for around 2-3 years, and I'm a software engineer at Red Hat. That's it.
And you're also
Next,
a Cinder core.
Oh, yeah. Next is Helen, I think, on my list.
Helen, you want to say hi?
Hi guys, can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can.
Yes.
Cool. So my name is Helen. I'm based in Ireland. I work with Dell EMC and have been working in Cinder for, I was trying to think there, nearly 6 years, I think, 5 to 6 years, long time. So I work on the maintainer of the PowerMax Cinder driver. Okay, who's next? Has Lee or Josephine introduced? Yeah, Lee.
Sorry, yeah. Hey, yeah, this is Lee here. So I'm a Nova core working at Red Hat, and a frequent, oh, that's my doorbell, the choice of working from home. And yeah, I'm a frequent contributor to debugging Cinder, at least downstream, so glad to be here.
Josephine, you want to say hi?
Hi, my name is Josephine. I work for SQLstack, and we're still trying to contribute the image encryption stuff.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Michael McClear.
Okay, yeah, so I work for Dell EMC based out of Cork in Ireland as well. I'd work alongside Helen on the PowerMax platform, been a contributor to Cinder for about 4.5 years now. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sophie Wong.
Hi, this is Sophie. I work for AT&T, and I have been working on Cinder for 5 years, and with different Cinder backends, and glad to be here.
Great,
Welcome.
thanks. Tushar.
Tushar. I'm working in NEC, and I'm working in Cinder from last 4 months.
Okay,
Welcome.
and also had a presentation at the summit on storage. So,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Zach.
Okay, I also work at Red Hat. I'm a quality engineer. I work with all the Red Hat guys. I try to poke, prod, and break Cinder.
With great success. Okay. I'm seeing somebody else, but I can't scroll down the list.
Zohar.
Oh, okay.
Hi guys, I'm a consultant working with Yoxia, and we will be introducing ourselves tomorrow about our storage backend integration with Cinder driver. So you'll hear more about us tomorrow, and I hope it's okay to just for me drop in and listen in.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Absolutely, welcome.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to say, I see Jay already started the attendees list. Please put yourself on there just so we can keep track of who's attending and what days.
Yeah, and it's nice to have your IRC name on there if we need to find you in the future.
So great, okay. While we're doing that, so I've started a late topics list. So as stuff comes up, so one thing about the schedule. So we'll do the usual thing. We start at the beginning and we just keep going. And at some point we'll stop each day. So we'll be flexible about moving things around. And occasionally, if a topic looks too big for the time we've got left, I may pull some small thing over. So we'll be flexible about changing things. Also, I made up this grid when I went to make up the schedule with half-hour blocks. But when I filled it in, I had in my head that they were an hour each. So I may have overloaded like the amount of stuff we can do. So just be aware of that. So some things may slip down. Or on the other hand, some things may go faster. So if something occurs to you that you'd like to discuss, way at the bottom of the Etherpad, there's a place to just put new topics, and then we can pull them in as they go. The other thing is, since we're doing everything virtually, we could have our mid-cycle like next week. So if it turns out that there's a couple of things we really want to discuss and don't get to this week, we can do another virtual, just a 1 hour or something pretty quickly after this one to follow up. So I think we're fine as far as coverage. Yeah, I mean, for a while, the Etherpad, the planning Etherpad was like stuck at 6 topics for about 6 weeks. And then in the last couple of days, it suddenly exploded. So we have lots of stuff to discuss, and I think should be interesting. Okay, so that's at the bottom of the Etherpad. So just add topics if things occur to you. And then just for people who haven't been here before, we just take notes right in this Etherpad. So if you have a question as somebody's talking about something, you can write it right in there. People will answer. Just take notes if, that's the way we work. Okay, just a quick heads up for business for Cinder. The stable Stein is going to, it's not going to be closed. It's going to go into extended maintenance mode, which means no more releases. So the last release will be around November 11th. So I've got the Etherpad there. There are a couple of outstanding patches that could go. But I guess I didn't want to put this on the mailing list because I don't want to troll for people that just like try to backport all sorts of stuff. But if there is something that would be important to have in the final Stein release, now's the time to think about making sure that it's proposed. So that's that, and it's roughly November 11th, so a week or so after the PTG. Okay, all right. I guess I should change the PTG bot to, and I'm in the wrong channel. All right, so what I want to do now is just quick summary of a couple of things that happened at the summit that impact Cinder, just so we're all aware. Sorry, I have trouble typing and talking and thinking. And then next is something. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Oh, good. Okay. Divisive language. Okay. So this is, I don't know. It's either completely uncontroversial or it's going to really piss people off. So, you take your own attitude toward that. But basically, there's a movement, not just, and the interesting thing is it's not just OpenStack, but it's to avoid divisive language. So the idea is we're an inclusive community, right? We write in Python because it's got a low barrier to entry, and we want to be fairly inclusive. But the main thing that brings us up is there's a movement among the database community to change the master-slave metaphor. And I think that one's kind of easy to understand why people would possibly be offended by that. But then it turns out there's all sorts of sexist and other type non-inclusive language that shows up in places where you might not think about it. So OpenStack has a group together to discuss this, and Amy Marich is here, so I'll let her talk in a second. But the basic idea is, I think, right, in new code, it's sort of like with 6, right? So in new code, we're not including 6 because that's backwards and we don't need it anymore. So I think, right, so moving forward, we don't need to include non-inclusive metaphors. Now, I did a quick look at Cinder. We're in pretty good shape except for some of the drivers. So the main one, so master-slave, we use slave, but it's because it's one of the parameters to the Oslo DB. So we'll have to wait for them to fix that. Some of the drivers use master-slave metaphors. And then the other one is whitelist and blacklist. So the other part of this is we can make the language technically more accurate. what we're trying to accomplish. So like with whitelist and blacklist, sometimes it's an allow list and a deny list, or it just depends on the context. Cinder itself doesn't have that, but some of the drivers do. So that's something to be aware of. But I think the main thing is, moving forward, just be aware of this. And Amy can tell us about, so she's got a working group together that's the TC has asked to come up with a statement. So there's links to the discussion on Etherpad. And on the PTG discussion, Etherpad, there's a bunch of links to other projects that are doing this. So you may be aware that the big database people are all making changes. GitHub has changed. All the new repositories don't have a master branch anymore. They have main. And so I don't know what Git itself, the upstream Git, is doing, but there's a big discussion going on there. There's a discussion going on in Kubernetes. So it's not just OpenStack who's doing this. Amy, is there anything you'd like to add? Thought I saw, yes, I do see Amy, but she's got trouble with her microphone.
I had to find my button.
Okay.
So basically, we are part of the working group is a standing working group, diversity inclusion, that reports to the OIF board. Now, get that right. So we've always had diversity inclusion aspects to, and we've done the diversity survey just to make sure that we are being inclusive and fair to everyone within our community. Ryan from AT&T, one of the Platinum board members, brought it to the board that, all these divisive language discussions are taking place and that we should do it as well. So I was definitely in favor of that. So we've now taken the initiative and we've come up what we call the stance. And everyone seems to be really happy with the stance itself. And it's been mailed to all the mailing list. Brian's already linked it, so I'm not going to read it out to anybody or anything like that. But when we had the forum session last week at the summit, we were asked to put together more specifically words that we should focus on, as well as possible replacements for them. That is something that originally our group was avoiding because we're being very clear that all the decisions will be in the technical committee hands for the various open infra projects, because the words that might work for OpenStack may not work for Quota and so on. So one thing that we wanted to make clear as well is master and slave as a slave reference is something we are targeting, but the fact that master has so many uses that aren't slave related, master degree, master craftsman. So it can be a level of knowledge or skill, which is why we will do whatever the Git community eventually decides on as far as branch name, but we're not running out because GitHub changed to main, because that may not be what Git changes to. Brian already mentioned a lot of the database projects. So far it's looking like Replica is definitely going to be the replacement for slave in most of them, but they haven't necessarily agreed on what's going to replace master. So the thought is also that we're going to basically make a line in the sand for new projects that are onboarding into the foundation. These are things you need to be aware of. These are things you need to adhere to in regards to these things. But say, for example, upstream provider of Git, just because that's handy, hasn't made a change yet. When they make the change, we will need to change to match it. But we're not saying that we need to change everything in our history just because we have this initiative, because it won't make sense to. If people wanted to change master and slave in their documentation, they can, hopefully choosing the words that their database project is choosing, such as MySQL or MariaDB, because we've got both of those in use commonly. But at the same time, if they write out the command to start a slave, they're still going to have to use the word slave there. On the code, you're still going to have to use the word slave because that's what your upstream provider is still giving you. But anywhere you can soften a load, like Brian mentioned that in the interface some years ago, you remove the word slave. That's a place where it's hidden, and that's easy to change. So places where it's visible but doesn't affect code, those can go ahead and be changed. But we have to be conscious of the fact that we need to adopt things as our upstream providers do.
Okay, thanks. So like I said, Cinder's in pretty good shape as far as this goes. So we're mostly going to just watch out for introducing, new usages. But I think, as far as removing old ones, right, we discuss it on Gerrit as we always do, right? So if we change vocabulary for stuff, we'll do it in a way that technically makes sense, and that works. So nobody's going to be putting, well, people might try this, but we won't be approving any of these patches to just change, right, random words to other random words. So this will be done responsibly. Anybody have any questions or observations, or maybe this is a happy hour discussion? Anyway, you can look, there's strong feelings about this. So you can look at some of the other projects that have started this already to, if you want to get a taste of that kind of thing. Okay, the OpenStack, thank you, Amy. The OpenStack client situation was discussed at the forum, and I've completely forgotten what was the big deal. It's still in the same situation, right? There's nobody really working on it. It looks like Stephen Finucane from Red Hat is interested in pushing this more. I think Nova would like to get rid of supporting the Nova client. But basically, right, we still have this situation. It's got to support microversions better, and there's still some interface problems. There's still some problems with it loading everything under the sun when you try to start the thing up. So people are aware of that, and they're going to work on that. So basically, this is a heads up. Now I remember why I put this on here. So it's not a community goal to push everybody to the OpenStack client this cycle. So you don't have to worry about that. If you're interested in this work, though, I'd contact Stephen Finucane and see what they're trying to do. They're trying to clean some things up. Because there's the OpenStack SDK, and then there's the OpenStack client, and then there was the Shade thing. So Shade was an opinionated way to use OpenStack. The SDK is supposed to be, I'm still not quite clear on why this doesn't, it's supposed to be basically just using our client classes to do stuff. But there's some problems with making that actually a reality. And then the OpenStack client is supposed to use the SDK. But none of that stuff is like smoothly operating at this point. There's a bunch of changes that have to be made to get all that stuff running smoothly, and then we can see what to do. So that's basically, probably if you look on that Etherpad I have linked, you'll get more information because I forgot a bunch of stuff. But that's basically my take on this, is we don't have to do anything right now. If we add functionality, we do have to continue to maintain the Cinder client because that's what people are using to, do a lot of Cinder stuff. But if you're interested in getting, right, one client to rule them all and would like to work on that, I'm sure Stephen Finucane would welcome your help. And it's interesting work too, but so that's all. Okay, community goal for Wallaby. So, okay, I'm trying to go fast because I obviously overscheduled this. So I should just stop for a second and ask if anyone has anything they'd like to say. Or the other thing you could do is just type directly in Etherpad and just tell me to shut up because you have a question. I won't take offense at being told to shut up. So Stephen Finucane's a Nova Core, and he's been doing some Oslo work, but he's also been working with the OpenStack client and some things. Okay, so at this point there is, so next topic. So there is one community goal for Wallaby that's been accepted, and it's to migrate from Oslo root wrap to Oslo privsep. Now I looked at they've got Cinder listed as a project that's still using Oslo root wrap, which does not seem to be accurate as far as I can tell. Because I looked at Brick and CinderLib and Cinder, and we're all using PrivSep. Now, so from my reading of the goal, there's like a major goal and sort of the spirit of the goal kind of thing. So the actual goal is to get rid of any imports of Oslo root wrap, and then a hacking rule is going to be introduced. So when we use hacking, well, it'll break any project that's still using Oslo root wrap. So I think we're okay there. The spirit thing is there's a good way to use Oslo PrivSep, and then there's the not so good way. And the not so good way is, so Oslo PrivSep allows you to have, from my understanding, allows you to be very precise about what commands are allowed. And the idea is that you don't want to give any of our processes more permissions than they absolutely need to do whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. An easy way to make this work is to just make the PrivSep rule do anything you want, and then everything still works. So that may be the case that we're not quite as, I didn't really look into this, and it's not obvious to me that we need to, at some point we should do it just as a matter of proper security procedure, but I don't know that we have to do it to satisfy this goal. But if anyone's interested in narrowing, in making more precise PrivSep rules for the particular things we need PrivSep for, that would be good. And then, just this is out of nowhere, somebody sent something to the mailing list today saying that we run QEMU image as root with the NFS driver to do something.
Yeah,
okay.
That's a whole thing that, I don't know, I'll look at that mail some more. I thought you by earlier. I'm not really sure if that's something that's wrong or if that's something that's like that because it needs to be that way.
Yeah, my impression was it might need to be that way. But anyway, okay. So that's just sort of mildly related to this.
So Brian, on this topic, there's also a variant of this, or another aspect we should consider, is that the Oslo PrivSep documentation states that all your PrivSep code should live under a directory. In our case, I think I don't know if it's privilege or PrivSep. Okay, but there are other people that suggest that your code using PrivSep should actually live where it should be, where it would normally be placed. So if you have a method that uses PrivSep to read a file, it should be where you would normally put it. If it's in my driver, in the RBD driver, it should be there. But the documentation has not been updated, so I don't really know what's the official stand on this.
Okay.
So that's probably something we should also look into, where the code should actually be.
Okay.
Well, that comes up when actually using it for running privileged Python code, right? More than the root wrap kind of.
Exactly. But there is one of the advantages of PrivSep is precisely that you now, to read a file which requires privilege, you don't really need to run a different process to actually just do a cat or anything like that. You just read the file. Yeah. And like you said, it comes up mostly in those cases where you replace root wrap calls with Python code.
So just some input from when we discussed this with the TC. So the goal is to get away from using root wrap, obviously, to get everybody using PrivSep. And it is strongly encouraged that PrivSep be written well. I don't know that anybody is doing a audit and going through all of those, the changes. But I think, we want projects to do what is best for OpenStack as far as implementing them in a way that will be more secure than what we had with root wrap. So getting away from root wrap is the first step. And if it can be done in a way that improves security, that's the bonus.
Okay, great. Yeah, it would be good for somebody to double check. I mean, I just did quick reps through the code base, and it looks like we're only using PrivSep. But if somebody wants to double check, please feel free to do that. And
So
then,
I thought we had done that. Didn't you do a lot of work towards that, Eric? Like back around the Denver PTG a while ago that we had.
Someone did. I think we did a while ago, converting from using root wrap to PrivSep, but still doing the CLI style calls with it. I'm pretty sure we did that like a few releases ago.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I think Walt did some work on that too.
okay, so in terms of accomplishing the goal, I think we're okay, like, strict goal-wise. But there is room to do better work here if somebody's interested.
One question. When we launch PrivSep, we are currently using root wrap. So how should we actually launch it if it's not with using root wrap?
I think you have to use root wrap unless we're going to go the route of building up a systemd unit file that tells systemd how to do it for us. But I don't think anybody wants to do that in upstream Cinder. So yeah, I think you still have to use root wrap to do that part because it's the only way to elevate to it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thanks.
It might be worth finding a way to turn that off for distributions that want to do it via systemd or something, but I don't think anybody's looked into that.
Letting Jay finish typing the sentence. Okay, so anyone interested in security type stuff who would like to look into these questions a little bit, there's room for that. Okay. All right, now, so that goal has been accepted, so that's an official Wallaby goal. Now, I went to, last night my time, or like at the beginning of the day, UTC today, there's a policies pop-up team. So as you may be aware, there's been some work on the policy side where basically what we're trying, well, there's a couple of things, but one of them is trying to solve that bug that Adam Young wrote the song about. It's admin anywhere is admin everywhere. He plays it on the saxophone. He mapped the number of the bug to like notes. Anyway, so to address that, some roles have been introduced and some new techniques of doing policies have been introduced. And hopefully all the OpenStack projects will migrate toward those eventually to make for a coherent and secure experience for operators. But the first step toward that, anyway, that's the long-term goal. So short-term, it looks like for Wallaby, it's going to be to make policy.yaml the default policy file for all OpenStack projects. Now, it just so happens that we did this in Stein, and backported it to Queens. So, you know, goal accomplished for us. And then the next step is going to be using the consistent and secure policy stuff. So that's going to happen as a community goal, possibly in X, but we'll see. Now, the one thing that we haven't done yet that is part of the, well, so the goal hasn't actually been proposed yet, but it's possibly being proposed as we speak. I'm pretty sure it's going to be accepted because it is kind of important. Nova has deprecated the policy.json file. Now, what's really weird about this deprecation is that since YAML is a superset of JSON, any JSON file is a YAML file. So you can just fill a file with JSON and call it anything you want, right? And so it's kind of hard to explain what the support that's being removed from JSON is. It's basically stuff has been built into Oslo policy to allow you to deprecate policies and put comments in the policy file that you generate that explain what's going on and what kind of changes there are. And since you can't do any of that kind of thing in JSON, since there are no comments, we don't want to do that. So basically, I think the deprecation is just, we expect the way that OpenStack, or I guess for Cinder, just for us, the way that we will express policy language is only in YAML from now on. And if people want, yeah, I guess that's what we would say. Anyway, I'll have to figure out something. I'll propose a, you know, a patch, or it would just be a release note. But we have asked, so we've got, so anyway, we've been using policy.yaml as the default file. We've been generating policy.yaml, and we have had an upgrade check that checks to see if you've got a policy.json and warns you that, no, really, you should be using policy.yaml, and that the policies in code change behavior. So, yay. Okay, so that's basically us. So it looks like for the easy part of the goal, we've got it accomplished. The stuff about making the policies consistent and secure, Rajat's done some work on that with the new API to introduce the project level defaults, does recognize scope. And we'll talk about this a little bit with the vocabulary stuff. So it's basically, Keystone has roles and scopes available, but of course, unless our policy engine takes advantage of that stuff, they don't mean anything. So that's what the X goal is going to be. So we can start working on that sooner. It's just that it won't, right? It's not, we're not under the gun yet, but we will be eventually. So we need to start thinking about that kind of stuff and changing our policies. But the first thing we need is like more extensive policy tests to make sure we have a good baseline for the current behavior. And I think I said that. Yeah. So basically, so what I'm thinking is, this may be a good topic for the mid-cycle, is just talk about exactly what the changes are that are happening, or they've sort of happened already in Keystone. It's just they haven't really been implemented widely yet. And so what we need to do in W to prepare for this is to get better tests, just to make sure that when we switch over our policies, the thing we don't want to have happen is that somebody who couldn't do something under the current defaults suddenly has powers that they didn't used to have. So we want to make sure that admins behave like admins and non-admins behave like non-admins, and that we know that. And then once we change stuff, our test should indicate to us whether we've gotten the policies configured correctly. Because as you know, if you've tried to configure the policies, it gets pretty hairy, and it's very easy to misconfigure policies if you're not testing very thoroughly. Okay, any questions about that one? So it looks like as far as the actual goal goes, we're good, but we need to start planning ahead to be ready for the next cycle goal. But I think it's mostly in terms of testing.
So I
Okay,
just wanted to add something into it.
sure.
Yeah, so I have introduced the system scope policies, but the Tempest still doesn't have the infrastructure to support it. Like there are certain patches that support system scoped user in Tempest, but they haven't merged yet. So I haven't been able to write any test for that. And for the APIs that I'm doing the project validation for system scope, that also those tests fail. So that is under progress. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, so they're right. So part of what the policy pop-up team is doing is going to be making the transition to get support for all this stuff into DevStack, so everything can be tested in Tempest. Okay. Any questions or anything? So that was basically it. Other stuff happened at the summit, but I can't remember everything. Our forum sessions were so we had variable attendance for our forum sessions. So the first forum session we had 127 people, which was amazing. But I later realized it's because it was the only thing happening at that time at the summit. And since things were broken, everybody joined that. So yeah, so that was interesting. And then our CI forum session was mostly people who are here right now looking at each other because we didn't get much attendance for that one. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So Rajat's got something related to the policies, which is the removal of the nested quota drivers. So Rajat, take that away and I'll put that in the PTG bot.
So nested quota drivers were implemented as a part of like Keystone supported hierarchies of project in which we had a parent and then there was a flag, its parent on the DB table, and that said like that mentioned all the hierarchy, but it didn't work very well initially. I talked to Lance regarding that, and also they don't much encourage it with new scopes they have. So the scopes handle the hierarchy very well. So this was also deprecated in train and was marked for removal in Usuri. We have certain comments on the board. So I just wanted to implement the project validation. Like currently in quotas, we don't validate the project. Like we can, I can query anything about any project or like any random value, and I can modify quota for any random value, and it doesn't validate if that's a real project or like or not. So I wanted to implement that, but there is a lot of nested quota driver code around it that would make it somewhat complicated. So I just wanted to remove this as it was already past the like it's already past the deprecated cycle. So I have proposed a patch. So just wanted to end with that.
I would like to add that the code Rajat wants to add will help a lot with people complaining about, hey, I set my quotas to 10 volumes and they are not working. And that's because projects can be UUIDs or non-UUIDs. So we don't have any validation, and we require the actual value, not names, nor anything. And some people, they just introduce the name, and when they should be introducing a UUID, and then Cinder just accepts it. So when you say you say set it for my project, and it says cool, done. You say what's the quota for my project? It gives it back, but then you use my project, and it doesn't get used because you should have passed the UUID. So with Rajat code, it will be able to confirm the value with Keystone and say, okay, what you've given me, it's useless. I cannot set the quota for that. We've had customers complaining about that, and you have to explain, no, you have to pass here this value. And they always wonder why we don't validate. So this will be a great first step to get that done.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the nested quota driver has been deprecated long enough with no complaints that let's just yank it. So I don't think that's controversial at all. So good. So that'll be nice. Any other comments or? Okay. Yeah, so there used to be a kind of prejudice against making API calls to other services as a part of satisfying one of our API calls, but I think nobody thinks that anymore, especially for something quick like this, because you got to validate tokens anyway, so we have to contact Keystone. So we might as well contact them just to verify that this piece of information is what it is. And it's not like this happens a lot, right? Because it's a admin action to set the quota. And once you do it properly, you're not going to be messing with it very much. So I think it's good, because it's not like it's difficult to have a typo in a UUID. So that's a very annoying bug to have happen when you set everything and it's not working, even though you're convinced that you did everything properly. So I think that's a good improvement. Okay. All right, so we are just like speeding along very quickly. All right, so Gorka's got a topic on here about cleanup improvements. So Gorka, take it away.
Yep, thanks. So currently our code is, well, we don't have retries when that flow fails or anything. So if you're creating a volume and the code suddenly breaks in an unexpected way and we don't change the status, or if a whole service goes down, we have a code we can call to clean up things, or when the service restarts, it will automatically clean things up. But I think the code we currently have is quite basic. I have listed here what I think are all the cleanup mechanisms that we currently have. For example, if a volume was creating, we set it immediately to error. Downloading, the same. If it was uploading, we change the status based on the on the number of attachments it has. Deleting, it's the only one we will do properly, because when we detect that a volume was deleting and the operation was stopped somehow, we will retry it again. So this will end up in the user expected result. The volume will be deleted. And we have something similar for the backups. So I was wondering if we should try to improve them. For example, for creating on the cleanup, we could actually retry the operation. It is something that it's doable. If it's a create volume from image, we have the image information stored, if I remember correctly, in the metadata, in the database already. So we could pick it up and retry again. What same thing if we are creating volume from another volume, things like that. So I'm wondering if it's worth the effort, and if this, and mostly not only if it's worth it, if it can lead to something users don't want. For example, if you suddenly create a volume on an operation that had failed, or that stuck in creating, and the service restarts and creates it properly, if the users will not be expecting that, and if it could be problematic for them.
I think the main tricky part about retrying volume create is you don't know if maybe you actually did create it before on the back end, before the service failed, and then you end up doing it twice.
Yeah, the trick there would be to make a call to delete first. So you're sure that if you have something on the back end, it will get deleted. So this may require some improvements in the drivers, because since some drivers store metadata into the Cinder volume in the database for provider location, things like that, when you do a call to delete, they may not have that information. So yeah, that can be tricky, but I don't think that's any different than from what a user would get doing it manually. They see that it's stacking creating, or it changes automatically to error, they call delete. And if the driver isn't fancy enough to figure out that the volume is actually there, even if the provider location or anything is not, it will leave the volume there anyway. So I don't think we can work around that problem, I think, the one that Eric mentioned, by deleting first. Anybody else thinks there's any reason why we shouldn't retry the uploading, creating, downloading, etc.?
I believe it's very useful because currently in NetApp Solidifier driver, there's a code that when volume creation fails for some reason, there's a retry in the driver code to send another API request and see if it's able to create, and if it's suspect that it's a network issue, instead of retrying the creation, it tries to get the volume that might be created in a previous request and so on. So it's something that is being currently done in the driver code, and it would be very nice if it's done in the core part of the code.
I think, Lucio, what you're saying is slightly different. Yours is an improvement on a specific call, because in your case, if you don't retry and you fail, right, what would happen is the volume would be set to error normally, right?
Yes, that's right.
So that's a different case. This is when we do the cleanup. So only when you kill a Cinder volume service in the middle of an operation, it's what it was doing creating. You kill the service, the database reflects that it's on creating. So when you restart the service, it is changed to error automatically. And also when your if you have active running, one of your nodes goes down and you make the call using the Cinder workload or jobs or whatever I call that, and make a call to the cleanup, it will change it to error. And I think for active, it could be convenient to be able for a system administrator, if it calls a cleanup, for things to take where they were left off, instead of suddenly all your volumes become in error or whatever. So that my original idea was mostly in lines with active, where now one goes down and everything that was going on there, users will have to repeat.
Got it. I missed the first line of the topic. Right now, our resource cleanup on start.
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah. I like your idea of retrying, but I thought that we had a retry mechanism in the scheduler. I would have to check it to see if it actually works.
Yeah. So there's a issue that we had to address inside the driver, in addition to the scheduler part, because of some issue that we found. It's kind of a workaround, but yeah, it might be improved after looking deeper in the scheduler code. But yeah, it's a topic.
So nobody is against us improving, or by us I mean me, improving the creating and downloading, uploading, and all this to on cleanup to actually complete the operation. Oh, okay, good. And there are other. I noticed that some other operations are left with an ing status when you kill the service. For example, if you were migrating, retyping, you kill the service, you bring it up. We don't have cleanup code for that, not even to return this to available, nothing. We just leave it as migrating or retyping, and that's not great either. So, yeah. Yeah, I will work on this, and I don't know if I will write a spec, mostly for documentation purposes, or maybe I will just write the patch and include the doc explaining the cleanup code that will happen on each of the cases, and it can be reviewed there. People prefer a spec, or I can do just the code.
I mean, I think, I don't know, what do you think, Brian? I don't know that it needs a separate spec for this.
Yeah, I'm thinking it may be better to just see how you've decided we can structure it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to affect the API or anything.
Nope.
I mean,
Though it will affect what happens when
yeah,
a service restarts.
you could just track it with a Launchpad blueprint if you want.
Okay.
Just so that there's something tying these together. But yeah, because in your spec, you'll just explain exactly what you've just done in your code. So yeah, but I think it's a good idea for sure. Hey, Sean.
Gurka, I had one question.
Sure.
Yep.
So we do this manually by reset state, right? Like we can reset the attached status and the status and migration status.
Reset status is a different thing because you can, for example, reset status is what you would use to fix migrating and retyping because there is no cleanup code. So you will be forced to do this for your users right now. So this is only, so that is a different mechanism we have to manually fix things, the reset status. This is more on what gets done automatically right now.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, then I will work on this and see if we can get something nice in here.
Yeah, that sounds good. Any other comments or questions? Be interesting to see what you come up with. Yeah, I think operators will certainly like this. Okay. All right, I'm going to update the PTG bot. We're running ahead, so we may pull in something from tomorrow or Friday or something. Oh yeah, something I forgot to mention earlier. You may have noticed all the grenade jobs have been failing like crazy on patches. So something merged a couple of hours ago that I believe will affect this. Somebody filed a bug against Cinder, but I think it was really a Nova bug. So it had to do with an incompatibility between the latest libvirt Python library and Python 3.6. So the patch is up. I did a retry on a random Cinder job, and I forgot to open it back up and see what's happened. But I'll check on it before happy hour, and hopefully we can be happy that the grenade jobs are all fixed. I'm pretty sure that's what it is, but it's possible there's also something bad happening in Cinder. You just never know. So if you've been seeing a lot of failures, everybody has, and that may be fixed by the time we're finished with the PTG today. Okay. So I want to bring up a spec that we talked about at the last PTG and I believe at one of the mid cycles. So the link is here, and I guess I should, it's in the Etherpad, so you can just grab it out of there. So it's got a bunch of -1s on it, which ordinarily would be bad. But so basically, I think what's happened is that the person who proposed this got sick and tired of the going through reviews and requested changes, and has a patch and it's working, so he just doesn't care. But it looks like it may be a useful thing to do. So it's a very short spec if you would like to open it up and take a quick look. So basically, what's happening is the problem they're seeing is that we store some stuff in the database, the values get out of date, and you get anomalous results when people are checking their quotas or quotas are being enforced. So the proposal is that we should just dynamically, do a sum in the database and just find out right now how many gigs or whatever is this person using, and then enforce based on that. So the concern has been, what's that going to do to performance if we're hammering the API like this? So the proposer was asked, hey, do you have any performance results? And he posted them in here. And the criticisms of the results have been, they don't display properly, which is a perfectly good criticism, right? Because we want to be able to read this. But my question here for us is, what I'm trying to say is this. I think this is a good idea. We have some performance results here to look at. So what I would like to know is, are these results sufficient to say, let's go ahead and do something like this? Or do we need to have better data? And if we do need better data, what should it look like? Okay. Yeah, Eric.
I don't personally think we really need better data. I haven't studied the data that he put in here, but I've kind of thought that we should do this for years anyway. And I think the onus is on somebody who thinks this is going to cause a huge performance problem to show how that's actually going to happen, more than us trying to prove it the other way. I think we should just do it personally. The tricky part of this whole spec is it's a couple sentences that says remove the quota table and calculate the stuff up on the fly, which is the right idea, but there's a whole lot more code involved than what it sounds like based on the spec that's a few sentences long. But I do think it's the right idea.
I agree with Eric, and I think that even if this creates some impact on the database, we can always go and analyze our current code and remove all the redundant reads that we do, because there are, with the change from using just IDs to passing version objects through the RPC, we have legacy code that is where we pass the ID, and that method calls again to the database to retrieve the whole object that we already have in memory, just for the sake of reading the same data, not for an update. So if we are concerned, we can implement this and then go back and start removing all the redundant database calls that we are doing in other places, and thus trying to balance or them out. You know, we added a bunch of database coding here. Let's remove redundant over there.
Okay, that's a good point. So how? So before we push ahead, so is everybody pretty cool with trying this out? I mean, it does seem right. Databases are pretty much optimized, and if we have good indexes, the calculation should happen pretty quickly.
Our quota results have always been a nightmare and a pain point, so I think anything we can do to try to improve the results, that's good.
Okay, and then I had the impression that, I think this was Sam Morrison who posted this. I had the impression he's running a patch that does some of this. But I'm not sure why I had that impression.
I don't think I've seen a patch that does any of this.
No. So I wonder. Okay, so I guess if someone's interested in taking this on, we'll have to revise the spec. I guess that was the main point, was, do we need, since a sticking point in the past has been the performance issue. So I think we can let's just stipulate that that's not an issue and be more precise about exactly how we're going to, what kind of change would have to happen. Okay.
The main question, as always, is is anyone actually working on implementing this?
Silence.
Or I guess, has anybody running with local patches that address this? All right, well, I think we've made progress in the sense that the problem with the spec now is lack of specificity about what exactly is going to be changed, rather than worrying about the performance issue. So at least that's good. So if somebody is interested in working on this, we know where to focus.
I would say that I don't think we want to push too hard on code detail for this spec, because if you study up how this quota code works enough to understand what's going on there currently, there's not a whole lot of different ways that you could apply concepts the spec is about. So it's, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is that prototype code is probably way more useful for this than a spec that spells out all the code to change, I would think.
Okay. That seems reasonable. If somebody picks this up, right, mention it at a Cinder meeting, and we can, right, be a little more helpful about what exactly we'd be looking for. Any so we've left this in the past that we would really like somebody to work on this. So in Wallaby, we would really, really like somebody to work on this. Okay. Okay. Yeah, and actually somebody may pick this up. So it's a pain point for a lot of operators. So I was mainly interested in whether we were going to have to run some kind of detailed performance analysis first. I think, well, we'll see what happens. Okay. Any questions, observations? As far as like, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to know that there's a lot of people that would be happy to have this working better.
I guess we can say, right, if somebody does pick this up, we will nominate them for the Hero of Cinder award for this cycle. So if you need any incentive, you could be a Hero of Cinder for this cycle. Right. Well, we're just cruising along. Let's take a 5-minute break while I figure out what else we will, or should we just do let's start with the vocabulary thing and see where that goes. Because we got like 40 minutes to happy hour. This isn't going to take 40 minutes though. So I'm looking to see. Well, I do have a topic from tomorrow that I've got my name on, but I really don't even know what I was going to talk about. So I'll just talk about it now instead of waiting. Because, right, so robustifying the volume driver interface. Let me update the PTG thing, and then I'll just lay out what the concern is, and then we can do this in a more constructive way later in the week. But I'd like to toss this out here. Oops. Okay. So this is, I don't know, it's sort of it's not a complaint. It's, I guess, an observation. And this came up at the last summit because we have we have multiple, we have the interface classes, which are useful and I think are used in some of the tests to make sure that drivers actually implement the required features. We also have the abstract driver classes that I think are the ones that are actually used when people implement drivers. So we got two different ways of specifying what it is that drivers are supposed to be doing. And then in addition, so the example I have here was we recently refactored the driver slightly to move the get volume stats method into base driver instead of being implemented all over the place since it was so similar. But then the backport got through where it was relying on, the backport got through based on the refactor, but the refactor hadn't been backported. So other than saying that, that's not great. So partly it's more tests, but also maybe a little more precision about the driver interface would be helpful. And to a certain extent, right, Eric has started the work on the typing, which can be helpful here because we can be more precise on what exactly drivers should be returning and what they should be expecting to see. Excuse me, my dog is making noise. And
so I'll wait for Brian to reappear here. A lot of, I think a big part of figuring out what to do with this is understanding exactly what we want to provide as far as a driver API. So there's what we do now, which is mostly the driver API is defined by the code and we can change it. And if your driver is in the tree, we can just change it and change your driver and it's all fine. This is kind of the classic Linux kernel model and it works great for stuff in the tree. Kind of a pain if you have a driver that's not in the tree because stuff just changes and then you have to realize that you need to go change your driver. But we, don't really pay a ton of attention to people without a tree drivers. One different way to do it would be to actually document and define an API. And then every time we change it, we publish a thing that says we're changing the API in this way. That could add a little more control to things, but we'd have to figure out if that was actually worth the effort involved in doing it. I think it's questionable, but it's worth considering maybe. I don't know. I think those are the two main options, is kind of just let it be defined by the code and we can just change it, which is kind of nice because when we add things and change things, we can just do it versus actually documenting and providing an actual interface. I guess, do we know that anyone actually cares that we don't have a very robustly documented API?
I care.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's really tough debugging stuff when you don't know and reviewing patches when you're not sure if what you're getting in the methods are a version object, or you're getting a dictionary, you have or an instance. Sometimes we have all, and because we provide compatibility for them all, so you can access everything as a dictionary. You don't know what you're getting, and sometimes you actually in a driver want to access a specific method from the version object, that because we've been improving the version object to have more logic and have it all in there. And you try to do it, and suddenly you're trying to call that into a dictionary, and yep, that doesn't help. So I think it would be helpful. And for sometimes when you're trying to understand the driver interface, you look into the code, but you look into other drivers. And what if that driver has very legacy code in that section, where, for example, where we allow database access? You think, oh, so accessing the database is fine and is what I should be doing. And instead of using the version object attribute, you go and make another query to the database. So I think it has value documenting it. Maybe just in small steps, instead of trying to document everything, we just start documenting either the easy ones or the more complex ones to explain what you get, what you know, better. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm thinking, let's take a look at the interface class, like for the volume driver, and look at it and see what's missing, because it does seem like it provides a lot of documentation, right, which is good. So that's, somebody put the link to the interface classes on the, but let's look at the.
Yeah, that was the goal of those interface classes.
Yeah, because it seems like we have some stuff in place that addresses this.
And then those are used to actually generate the docstring documentation for all of those calls, so that driver maintainers know exactly what's expected.
Right, but the change that Brian was talking about earlier, we actually made a field that was not a method part of the driver API, and I don't think this even covers that.
Would be harder.
Although the last commit to this,
this also doesn't cover objects versus dictionaries and some of the stuff.
Okay, so that's, so I guess my question is, right, so the object versus dictionary thing isn't covered, but could we address that by adding more precision to the doc strings here? Is that just all we need to do, or is there, because it looks like this is a good, so the get volume stats thing was actually merged into this. So I guess part of it might be that people aren't paying attention to this, which is bad on them, not so much bad on us. But I guess I would, so if we're going to do documentation, I'd kind of prefer to do it like this, because this seems to, right, it's auto-generated, it's specific, so, which is good. So, I mean, that means we've already got a really good start to this. We just need to put a little more time in making it a little more precise. Now,
so I think Sean, at one point you were working on some kind of automated checks against this interface stuff. I don't remember exactly what that did.
Yeah, it was just the TOX compliance target, and we had a job that would run every time. Kind of the problem with doing that was with our inheritance, whether a driver actually really implemented it or not, they'd really have to make a mistake to not pass that compliance job.
Oh yeah.
And it was pretty basic. I mean, we could change the compliance tests to actually be a little more thorough and check for things like any kind of fields that we expect to be public and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I would think, I don't know if it would need to be in a separate compliance thing or if you could just do it in the unit tests, but ideally we'd want to load every driver class, at least that we have in tree, and just inspect that it appears to have the right stuff in it.
Yeah, whether we do that as part of normal unit test runs, or we could change this compliance to load a different set of tests that do a more thorough check. I don't know. But we have basic mechanism for these things in place. I think we just need to figure out the right way to do it.
So Eric, with the type checking stuff, would it be appropriate to add typing to the interface classes?
Yeah, I think so. I suspect that to do that efficiently, we may want to detangle all this ABC class stuff that we've wanted to get rid of for a little while before bothering to do that. But yeah, it does make sense to do that because then you have kind of even a pre-unit test check that'll look to see whether things are at least shaped right.
So you have, can somebody explain so what's the problem with the ABC classes right now?
So we added all this ABC class stuff because somebody showed up and said, hey, there's this cool Python thing, and if we do this, it'll help make sure that drivers are implementing methods that are shaped correctly, and they can do some things like declare whether they implement methods for optimized image cloning or whatever, or not, by showing what they inherit. But it turned out that I think everybody kind of overestimated the actual benefit of this ABC scheme, and it turned out to not actually be super useful. And the problem now is that you can write a volume driver and just base it on the volume driver class, or you can write it based on all these ABC classes. And it's kind of a giant confusing mess for new driver writers. So what we kind of decided to do years ago was to just take out the ABC classes and go back to the base driver class that we had before, which is still in the tree. But we just haven't actually done that yet. And if we do the type checking work correctly, it'll actually provide the benefits that I think that a lot of the ABC stuff was supposed to help with, as far as ensuring that interfaces are matched up correctly and that kind of thing.
Does the ABC stuff, the multiple inheritance where your driver inherits like?
Yeah, you inherit like base volume driver, and then you can inherit like clonable something volume driver. I forget what they're all called now. But it's all in the driver.py, and it's all the classes that are in with VD. So there's base VD, clonable image VD, migrate VD, manageable VD. And it's just very complicated, and it doesn't actually serve a whole lot of purpose.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the code. Yeah, I don't have anything like really insightful to say. Looks like another one of these things. It would be great if somebody interested in architecture dug into this to make sure our interfaces are consistent with the documentation of all these ABC classes, and then yeah, I guess I wonder what kind of impact this would have on existing drivers.
Well, I had sketched out a plan. You mean for removing the ABC classes?
Yeah.
I had sketched out a plan, I don't know where, a few years ago, around basically drop all the ABC stuff from them and just turn them into normal classes that don't do anything, and you can kind of massage things along, step by step to get rid of them, rather than breaking everything that depends on them. So we could basically make them all not do anything, so that outside of the tree drivers could still inherit them, and they just wouldn't really do anything. And just update all the drivers in the tree to not use them anymore. And we could do that for some amount of time, and then actually just delete them.
Okay, so this looks like an interesting project for somebody who's interested in it. Okay. All right, so I guess I know what I'm about to say is I guess we've discussed this topic and we are now in the same place we were before we started. All right, so I think, all right, so my feeling as far as like documenting the driver interface, we should stick with the interface classes that Sean put together, and we can beef up the doc strings and type annotate, and that at least will provide people with I guess clearer documentation of what the drivers should look like. And as far as
I think
yeah,
and I think we should mention that probably everywhere in the driver.py file, because people may look into that file and not see the
Right,
whole
absolutely.
documentation. Yeah, we just have to say, hey, go look there for the proper explanation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's okay. That's a good point. And Jay's typing it as we speak. All right, so I guess actually, all right. So depending on who you are, you may have already been thinking of it this way. So we want the driver interface classes to be the reference point for the source of truth for what drivers are supposed to look like. Okay. So I can take an action item to at least go back and look and make sure there are sufficient things saying that in the appropriate places. And then as far as actually improving things, I mean, this seems like it would be a good summer project for a graduate student to just go, no.
No, it's boring. It doesn't get any visibility in terms of when you use Cinder. Yeah, it has great impact, but it's no, not great summer. I would hate doing that for a summer project.
Yeah, I'm thinking of it.
I'm okay
I'm thinking
doing
of it from
it.
my side, not from the student side, right? Yeah, as a student.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah. But I would nominate them for the Hero Cinder Award. Okay, so this is yeah. Let's see how many Hero Cinder nominations we can have by the end of this PTG. Okay. I'm trying to think of a way to describe this where it's not like a thankless task.
I can start working a bit on improving the documentation on the interface. Yeah. I'm not saying I will get everything done, but at least try to improve. For example, some of the methods that are expected to be idempotent, but we never set it. And this caused some nasty bugs with migration. For example, initialize connection, in theory, should be idempotent. If I call it twice with the same host and volume, it should return the same information, not create a new connection information. And some drivers don't do this because we never said it should. So,
well, that particular example is kind of hairy because I think Lee was working on adding a field to indicate whether that particular one is idempotent or not. But yeah, it's a good point. Because on the NFS driver, it's really not idempotent, but that's a whole nother thing.
Well, it might be good just, a small patch as you come across a bug that's right where you realize this is supposed to be one way and we haven't set it. We can just patch it. So at least we know where to do that. Okay.
Yeah, I'll have a look and see if I can give it a first pass to some of these interfaces.
You probably have a bunch of things in your head of issues you've seen where we can specify them.
Yeah, and the version object, I keep complaining. Maybe I can do something about it instead of just complaining.
Okay, well, that's good. All right, any other observations? So Gorka, you may be eligible to be a hero of Cinder.
Yoo-hoo!
Okay. Hey, Walt. Okay, so 15 minutes to happy hour. I guess let's go ahead and do the vocabulary minute then. So I did expect actually to spend only a minute on this. So one thing we need to keep in mind, I guess, so, right. So we have users, but they're different kinds of users, and we need to be exact when we're talking about them. So some things, when we have an operator, when we expect an operator to do something, we need to like call that out and not say user. So I think just the word user by itself, we should not use anymore. We want to be specific about, are we talking about an operator or are we talking about an end user? So, and that may not, we may need some finer granularity there. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking an end user is somebody who just, right, has normal credentials, uses the API and expects something to happen. And then an operator is someone who would have advanced credentials and be interested in, right, running and administrating Cinder. So that's as a start. Now, what's happening is also the term admin is becoming more and more ambiguous. And this has to do with some of the policy changes. So they're introducing or have introduced scoping into, so the way they decided to do this, sorry, let me back up. All right, so there's several ways you can administer Cinder. So you can be the person who installs everything and is a super user and can do whatever you want. You can also administer Cinder by just being like an intern who can do some stuff to like help reset, you know, volume status or something, but you're not allowed to do everything. And then some people may want to take their tenant and separate different classes of users in there. So you have somebody who can do all the regular stuff you'd expect you can do when you have project level credentials. But then you may want to restrict some of your users to not be able to do certain things. I'm being really vague about that. But basically that's what the vocabulary they're using in Keystone now is that you can have a project level admin. Now, basically what a project level admin is, as far as I understand it, is what we would normally consider as like a normal user in a project. So what they can administer is just, right, so for Cinder, just creating volumes. They can, I don't know what else they can do. I'm being...
Well, they should be able to reset the status of things, create the project default volume type, if I remember correctly. And so there are some things that they should be able to do, right?
It's basically what we decide we're going to allow them to do. So I guess the main thing is when we're speaking of an admin, I guess, and Rajat, you can correct me here. So it's like there's project level scope, there's like domain scope, and then there's system scope. So a system scoped admin is somebody who we normally think of as a Cinder administrator. So they have administrative rights over stuff that impacts the entire Cinder system. And a project level admin is just like a normal user who can do some, well, it's hard to say exactly what they can do because that's sort of up to us. But there's a scope that is available in Keystone now to say, hey, this guy is a project level admin. And then with the domain admin, I'm not exactly sure what they do, but they can do some kind of administrative stuff. Beats me. Anyway, the main point is we can't talk about admins anymore because we need to know when you're talking about an admin, what is the scope of the administrative responsibility we're talking about. So that's the main thing. So with users, we need to keep in mind, are we talking about an operator or are we talking about an end user? But then when we start talking about administrators, we have basically 3 gradations. And we need to start being a little precise about what we're talking about when we're saying an admin can do action X. It's basically what kind of admin are we talking about? So
I think we should probably link this with the topic we discussed on earlier into supporting the community goal of the consistency of secure and secure policies. Right now, we don't support the scopes, the different scopes. So we just have the Cinder admin. And as we define and add the others, we should go through the methods, the calls that we have, and define who can do what, and then add the new fine-grained admins, additional admins, right?
Yeah, and it's going to be, and that's a good point, and it's also related to the testing, because we need to make sure that the project admins can't do system admin type stuff.
This is going to be very confusing as we actually look at the code, because there's admin everywhere, admin context everywhere. So I think this is going to be a nightmare for a while.
It is, and I think that's why we need to make sure we got decent tests in place to get a baseline for what behavior should be like. But I think the admin that we have in the code now is really what we'd be thinking of as a system scoped admin. But I want everybody to be aware, because this is starting to come up, that when people just talk about admins now, you got to ask, what kind of admin are you talking about? So, right, so the one that we see in the code with the context is admin, that's what is coming to be called a system scoped admin. And what the policy team would like to see, or I guess this is the way the projects are going, is instead of defining context as admin, there will be a system scoped admin token. Rajat, you're going to have to, it's not a role, it's like something about the token allows you to have system scope, and then that person should be able to do what right now we think of as admin stuff. Which
That'd be like the root user, right? That's it as equivalent, I presume.
Yeah.
And what kind of actions against our API would a project level admin be able to do that doesn't exist today? I mean,
right. So, well, the new one is the default volume types. So Rajat's work so we have the new micro version that introduces the default volume type at the, project, I forget what we called it. It's like project level default volume type. So you only want responsible people setting that for your whole project. And so that would be the kind of thing where you'd want to say, all right, who's got the project level admin scope? They should be able to do this kind of action. Or the other way you can think of it is just, anybody in there can do it.
Is that the project owner?
Normally.
Yeah, the project, you would have a system scope admin who can change every single project's default. After all, they are what we normally call the Cinder admin. But if you define a specific project administrator, they should be able to change the volume type as well, right? The default of their own project. So that's a simple example. That's precisely a very simple example. The complex ones are the other operations that we have, who should be able to see, to do. Yeah. And like you said, that's going to be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is there's been, I guess for several cycles now, Keystone has come with a default role called reader. But unless this project's implemented, it really doesn't do anything. But the idea is the reader is supposed to have read-only access to stuff or be able to do non-destructive type things. I'm a little vague on exactly what exactly that means.
If I remember correctly, it's basically an administrator that cannot change anything. It can get administrator level information when it asks about a volume, or when it lists volume, it will see every single volume. But it cannot create, destroy, migrate, it cannot do anything. But it can get the whole list and everything.
Okay, so yeah, so that's partly why this group is called consistent policies, because our policy engine has to implement that in the same way that all the other services are doing it, or else, right, readers behave differently across different systems. So that's
I guess we need to create a master list of what are the different levels of users. I know I'm using the term loosely and incorrectly in this case, but the different levels of users and what their responsibilities are with respect to Cinder, and provide a list of features that they can and can't administer or see or view or edit or read.
Yeah, I think we wind up with like a 9x9 matrix or something. Yeah.
Yeah. We need to put that together before we actually start hacking on code, so we can make some sense of it, and then it needs to be documented, because this is a level of complexity that currently doesn't exist in Cinder to this extent.
For now, we can just add documentation, making sure that when we say admin, we are talking about Cinder administrator, which is a system scope administrator, and leave it at that for now until we create the list and we implement everything.
Yeah, so the main thing is we just start to be more precise. So when you see somebody mention admin, we need to explicitly ask in the spec, what's the scope of this administrator? And then, so somebody put a question about okay, so what am I saying? All right, so right, so this is in progress, but let's be aware of it. So while we're on vocabulary, somebody mentioned migrate.
Yep, I did.
Right. So Gorka, go
because
ahead.
People talk about migrate, and they say users should migrate, you should migrate. It's tricky because we have a migrate operation, and that is same only for administrators, and we have a retype which is same for users. So when somebody tells you need to migrate, in the end somebody may go to the migrate command, and that's not how you use it. So I think we should try to talk about you need to move your data, or come up with something that it's not action specific. So it's not migrate, it's not retype. Those are our actions, but you're moving the data from one backend to another, or one pool to another. Because yeah, I had weird conversations with migrate.
So you're saying migrate as different from retype?
Well,
we have a migrate action.
Right.
Except that they can
have a
turn out
retype
to be the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, what I meant to say
But from a user's perspective, you're moving data from one backend to another. You didn't have, yeah.
So now when you say user though, that would,
that would be end user.
Yeah, so at the end user level, you can retype things.
You cannot migrate.
Right. So you have to ask
and usually
administrator to migrate for you.
And they would normally not use migrate. They would use retype. Migrate is a very specific operation that has limited usability because it depends on how you have created your types. And in most cases, they will not be able to use migrate because their types are tightly coupled to a specific backend. And that comes with my next complaint about vocabulary, which is backend. We have like 6 different things that are backends. Is the storage array or cluster or whatever you have, is the Cinder service that it's running. It's also the volume backend name grouping, which can group together multiple Cinder backup services. It's also the backend section in the host field. So we have a lot of backend things. And I think this creates confusion for people when they go to use volume types. So everybody thinks that backend is the same thing. All these things I've said, they think that they are a single one. You have a storage array, which is a Cinder volume service, which is a volume backend name, which ties to a Cinder volume type. They think all those are one-on-one relations when they are not. Most of them are end-to-end. So if we try to be more specific and explain what the differences are, it probably will help everyone understand each other.
We probably need to do documentation update. So
yeah, I think I can write a single update with all these topics that we are discussing here, like what the difference, try not to use user, try to say end user or this one and the other ones to make it clear how we refer to things.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing is right, a lot of our examples, like for the volume types, right, for convenience, we also name it the same as the backend. And this happens in DevStack too, and in Tempest, because it's easy to keep track of things, but it's also kind of misleading because it gives you the impression that volume types and backends are tightly coupled, and we want them to be really kind of loosely coupled. Okay.
Surprisingly enough, in my very large deployment, we tie them directly to backend.
Do you? Okay.
Yes, we don't leave them untied. It just makes it so much easier for everybody. Even though theoretically they're designed to not be tightly coupled, but really we have 2 volume types and we have a fast and a slow, and they're tied to completely different setups. So for what that's worth.
Right, which is good, but I think like just by calling it fast and slow instead of whatever the Ceph or NFS or whatever, that's really the big step forward you want to take. Because you don't want to even though when you ask for fast, you're getting a particular backend, you want to be able to swap out that backend and still have fast as your volume type. So, okay. All right. Well, anyways, good. So let's be all more precise in our language and also more inclusive at the same time. Okay. So we've reached happy hour. So what I wanted to do was, so BlueJeans is nice in many ways, but one thing it's not nice about is showing everybody who shows up. Whereas MeetPad, you can actually see everybody who's there. So that's why we've got a MeetPad room set up for happy hour. Oh yeah, and also I forgot to mention this at the beginning. I'm going to do this experiment, so I will stick around for hallway time. But the thing I missed last week being at the summit was, well, first of all, I wasn't in Berlin during Oktoberfest. That really sucked. But also just running into people and just saying, being able to ask Rajat about, default volume types and what's up with that.